Just to tell you some background, Dr.
Hmm.
Joachim Taiber launched the idea to do the IMTS podcast. Not because it is hype and popular media type of activity, but because we want to be different and to make our site interesting to all our members. Coming up. Okay, welcome to the first IMTS podcast. Hi, Joachim Taiber, and welcome to our IMTS first podcast. This is obviously a historical day. Eventually, when I heard about it, I immediately told or sent email to Joachim, great, I will organize the podcast and you will be my first guest. So here we are. My name is Marijan Jozic and I'm from company OctonX, which is 100% affiliate of SAITC. SAITC stands for Industry Technology Consortia. And Joachim is Managing Director of IAMTS EV from Vienna. So, Joachim, all our members know you very well and have respect for your expertise, but some of them are afraid to ask some questions. Everybody knows that you are Professor Joachim Taiber. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I'm glad to do that, Marian. Well, the story how I got the professor is a longer story. So I try to make it short. But so when I started working for BMW, I was it didn't take a year, and I was introduced to Professor Joachim Milberg, who was at the time a board member. Later, he became the CEO and also the chairman. And he turned into my mentor. So I had many discussions with him, and he was a role model for me. He was a professor at TU Munich. He developed a research institute. He worked a lot with private sector industry, and then made that move from the university to BMW, and that inspired me quite a bit, because when I was in Switzerland, where I had my education, my academic education at ETH Zurich, I worked in a research environment where basically the academics interacted with private sector to work on applied research and development projects. So I was always very interested in that interface. And when I had this interaction with Professor Milberg, so he basically challenged me to come up with some new ideas how the Technical University of Munich should work with the private sector. And I came up with a cross-functional institute idea. But it turned out it was very difficult to implement this in Germany under at the time, this was in the late 90s, so there were organizational constraints. And I came then, I was introduced to a new project at BMW, which came from the US. And so BMW had a major plant and still have. This is in the meantime the largest plant that BMW has in the world, I think, in Greenville, South Carolina. And the plant is called Spartanburg, but the main location is Greenville. And so what happened that BMW was asked by the state of South Carolina to engage in a automotive research campus development, and they would be then the main investor. And so I got involved in this project. And as I mentioned, I had ideas for TU Munich, which we couldn't implement. So I tried to apply those ideas to this new project in the US. And then the first thing that happened was that Clemson University was the academic partner in this project. They sent a professor over to Germany to work with me in Munich to learn more about how BMW is developing cars. And he was, interesting enough, he was also educated at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, so we had the same academic background. And so I started working with him, and then he involved me more in this US program, and where we had to develop some curriculums for students and research programs. And I ended up to be the first director of the BMW Information Technology Research Center, which was a research center that was actually built on this campus. I was the first building on the campus, and I transitioned then from Germany to the US, also with my family. And as a consequence of this building up this information technology research center, I had to work with many uh, professors, Clemson professors, but also from professors from other universities that wanted to work with BMW. And but in particular, the main partner was Clemson University, which is the largest technology university in South Carolina. Um, and then during my time, I was 5 years in this position to lead the BMW Information Technology Research Center. I interacted a lot with those professors from mechanical engineering, from electrical engineering, and computer science. And when my time as an expat was up after 5 years, Clemson University approached me and asked me whether I would be interested to stay in the US, and offered me a green card, and also to wanted me to continue the work at this campus. And so I decided to do that because my wife is from Canada, and she was quite interested to stay in North America. So I decided to do this. And when I then joined Clemson University as a full-time professor, my first job was to develop a institute for advanced mobility. This I did for another 5 years after I already invested 5 years in this BMW IT Research Center. And then, so that's the story how I got a professor. So I'm sorry that this took so long, but I hope
No, this is quite
that
interesting story. So
explanation.
you have spent quite a lot of years in the States.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I'm still, my family is still in the States. So I'm, of course, now I'm traveling between Vienna and US back
Uh-huh.
and forth. But yeah, I spend a lot of time in these
But
states.
your PhD, you have done it also there in North Carolina, or?
No, no. So I grew up in Germany, but my whole academic life, from first semester until PhD completed, I spent actually in Zurich, in Switzerland, at the
Oh, okay.
ETH Zurich, or Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. So I studied first mechanical engineering, and then I did a PhD in what they call technology science, which is very much focused on computer science. And I did my PhD was in an AI topic, so artificial intelligence. And so
Oh,
the
that's interesting. Yeah.
title of my PhD thesis was Development of Feature and Constraint Based CAD/CAM System for Manufacturing Optimization. That's a very long title. Basically, what it meant was I worked on so if you take prismatic workpieces in the manufacturing world, so let's say brake systems, or something where hydraulic elements. So there, the problem is with some of those workpieces, they require a very complex drilling and milling, machining sequence. So I had in my thesis, I basically analyzed how do you represent um, a physical workpiece in a digital form. So like with so-called computer-aided design systems, so 3D CAD systems. How do you put attributes in the data structure? How do you describe your tools, your machine tools, to process the workpiece? In which sequence do you machine it? What are the tolerances? How do you map the geometry of the workpiece to the geometry of the tools. And there is a lot of analogy to what is happening today in autonomous driving. You need to digitize the roads. You need to think about the trajectories of the car using the road, and so forth. So there are a lot of the things that I worked on in the 90s, so to speak. So in during my PhD thesis. Is still interesting from a today's perspective, even in the artificial intelligence application for autonomous driving.
So actually, you was pioneering because in the beginning of 90s, that all started the CAD/CAM and
Mhm.
artificial intelligence theory. That all started around that time. So you was
Yeah,
pioneer in that area.
yes, I was actually working on the it was called the ACES kernel. So it's one of the first 3D solid modeling CAD kernels. It was developed in Cambridge in the UK, and I was involved in version 1.0. So I was deep involved in these CAD kernel system development in my early years. And I actually, after my PhD thesis, I joined this software startup that developed 3D CAD/CAM systems.
Okay, let's move now to IMTS.
Yeah.
IMTS used to be one of the consortium of SAITC,
Mm-hmm.
and it started, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
I was not at that time even involved in SAITC
Mm-hmm.
consortia, and it would be just interesting to know how it all started, because it is, you don't start consortium for sake of consortium to start something. There
Yeah, yeah.
is always that why you do that. So
Well,
can you tell us a little bit more
I
about
can
that?
tell you a little bit the story. So I coming back to this campus development that I mentioned, where I was involved with BMW. So on this campus, it was not a BMW campus. It was a campus that was built for public-private partnerships. So where multiple private sector companies are working with basically university or government organizations. So this is already a kind of a consortium style collaboration. So I was immersed in this environment. And then later, as I was a couple of years into this job, as I mentioned, at Clemson, there was I was confronted with a problem to develop a proving ground, so for automotive proving ground, which is a big focus for for IMTS, right next to this automotive research campus. And this was a former military base, so an airport, military airport built in the 1940s, and converted from an airport facility into a business park. And that business park was gigantic, was 2,500 acres large, and major portions of this business park were underutilized. And so the idea came up to, because the automotive research campus was developed to create a test area for automotive for the automotive sector, but we couldn't do it on the campus itself of on the automotive research campus because it was too limited. There were too many constraints, and then this airport facility was not far away. So this was my involvement, but in order to make this work, I had to involve many companies, not just BMW. So there was so I had to approach many companies to be interested in testing solutions for the automotive sector, and that could be companies from the infrastructure side, like communication companies, or electric utilities, where they are testing charging systems. And the big focus we had was to develop test site for the future. So like for electrification, for zero emission vehicles, for vehicles that are connected and then ultimately also autonomous. And so how I got into this consortium was an iteration. So first my problem was how to develop this proving ground in a consortium model. So then as I was doing this, then I compared with other uh, uh, testbed operators in the world that had the same problem. And one key event was in 2016. So this is now 6 years, 7 years ago, when I met Charlie Cheng, so who is a
Oh,
colleague of yours, right? And I met him at a smart city conference in New York. And I was invited by the conference organizer to organize a workshop to think about how do we test um, autonomous vehicles in the right test environment. And so Charlie was there, and we talked at that time already about closed and open test beds. So I think it was about 80, 90 people in the workshop. It was quite well visited. And then the last person in the room that stayed after I was finished with the workshop was Charlie. And then he told me that he was working on a project called Nice City in China. And so that he represented this organization in Shanghai, and then he invited me to come to China to learn more about these program. And then a year later, I was in China and attended a conference and was very impressed about what they were doing there. And so 1 year later, then in 2018, and this is a really funny story. So I was going to the Starbucks close to my private home to get coffee, and I meet a Clemson professor, and he asked me whether I want to serve in the board of an upcoming SAE conference. And that would be a specific conference about AV testing, autonomous vehicle testing, and all the experts in the world would meet there. And so I then gladly accepted his offer, and then got involved in this conference. And this conference was actually organized in that campus that I mentioned, where BMW was the initial investor. This is where the conference took place. And so this is how I met um, then Alex Kraus. So we met there at this conference together with John Tintinelli from SAE International, who is from SAE, and we then developed this idea that a consortium needs to be created. In particular, also in context to test beds, but also testing procedures, test methods, standards development. And this is how it started. And then from having this idea in during this conference to actually announcing it took another year. So in 2019, we then announced at the SAE World Congress in Detroit the IMTS. And IMTS was started as a program of SAITC. So I remember that I was in Silicon Valley at a meeting where where I tried to get feedback from Silicon Valley people and companies and experts about this idea of our consortium. And that's when we actually had our first discussion with SAITC and learned more about the program, the consortium program, and that's how it started. So quite an
oh,
interesting
that's a very
journey.
interesting story. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it always the great things always start with something little and
Yes. Yes.
accidental story, accidental meeting with somebody, and then suddenly
Yeah.
it grows to something really nice and big.
Yes.
So that
Mm-hmm.
there were four working groups at
Mm-hmm.
IAMTS. This was working group one, test scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Working group test beds, virtual validation was working group three, cybersecurity was working group four, and after Munich Messe 2021, this is now a little bit more than a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
there was a study group five was
Mm-hmm.
launched,
Yeah.
certification of
So
hubs. So
yeah, if we go back in history, right? So I said we announced it first in 2019, in April 2019. So what happened was that we had a major workshop in 2019 after we announced it in Detroit, in Munich, and with TÜV Süd, which is a founding member and of IMTS. And in during this workshop, we started to create the foundations. And as far as I remember, we had then another workshop in October 2019, where we then created these first three work groups that you mentioned. So scenario manage, so test scenarios, test beds, and virtual validation and testing. Or actually, to be correct, the work group three is correlation of physical and virtual testing. So correlation of,
oh, okay.
so just to be clear. And so we started with these three work groups. And then a year later, I think we started the cybersecurity work group, which was 2020.
Mhm.
And then 2021, we started the study group five, for the certification of highly automated vehicles over the whole life cycle.
Well, that is around time that we had that Corona pandemic. Was
Yes,
Corona pandemic a setback to activities of IMTS?
I would say yes and no. Okay, so I remember we had our last physical meeting where most of the key people came together was in New York with IEEE, because IEEE is also they joined as a strategic member. So we had a meeting at IEEE in New York. That was right before the pandemic hit. And then it became, let's say, what was fascinating for me was that we had to learn how to really efficiently use Microsoft Teams. It was actually a blessing that we moved to a digital platform, so where all the members could connect and talk to each other. So this helped us a lot to have this platform in place. And what I also think is that because everybody was at home, uh, there was quite a readiness to do some work in the work group. So we had actually, it was not that it was an interruption, and I think we came quite well through the pandemic. So we didn't lose members. I think there were only a few that maybe had financial issues that couldn't continue, but the core group and the majority of the members stayed together, and so we were able to continue and even expand the program.
Yeah, but there is some charm in face-to-face meetings because it is longer than just 1 hour meeting,
Absolutely, absolutely, and
but
this
you have
was
more
also,
interaction between people
yeah.
in a private time or by the coffee machine, and so
Yes.
that.
So you're right. So what we I can tell you was, and that was interesting. We did a symposium. Our first symposium was in 2021. We called it a virtual IMTS symposium. So when we brought the different folks from the different parts of the world together to learn more about IMTS. And then this year in June, we organized the IMTS symposium in Salazone, and there was really a eagerness from a lot of members to meet in person. So we had a great outcome. So more than 100 people were there in person. We had all everybody come to Hungary to see each other, and we had excellent discussions. Everybody was very motivated to interact. And I think, but as a lessons learned, because we are a global organization and the members are very spread out, we need to combine these virtual and physical meetings. So we call it hybrid meetings. So it's
Yeah.
basically this hybrid working mode is something that will continue. But of course, we are now very happy that we can meet more often in person.
Nice. I noticed that the TÜV Süd is playing quite an important role in the whole activity.
Yes.
What is their motivation to do that? Do they need outcome of our work from different
Yeah. So
working groups?
the motivation, and I would say it's TÜV Süd, but also the whole TÜV association, where there are multiple TÜV, as you know, there's TÜV, multiple TÜV organizations, TÜV Nord, TÜV Rhineland, TÜV Süd, and so forth. So the different TÜV organizations are under this umbrella. The reason why they are so motivated to engage in IMTS is that they are typically the key partners of the automotive sector for homologation. So where you need to get to a type approval.
Uh-huh.
And getting the homologation for highly automated and fully automated vehicles is a big challenge. So you need regulation for this. You need the technology. You need the experts. So I think the motivation from TÜV Süd and the TÜV Association is to bring in their knowledge and develop standards and processes that are then applied by their clients.
Well, on IMTS internet site, I've seen that there are also quite a lot of members from China.
Mm-hmm.
It looks that they're really motivated to be a member, but there is that distance and language barrier and some political barriers. So
Mm-hmm.
how to cope with those members? It
Yeah, so
looks that they
they.
are very knowledgeable because when I was at last time in Munich at that car show, I have
Mm-hmm.
seen that they have really a huge auto industry in China. So it looks that
Yeah, I
they would
mean,
like to connect with
yeah.
Western.
So there's several factors to answer your question. So the one is that China is the largest automotive market now in the world since a number of years, and uh, the other important factor is that so far China was more focused on their domestic market development. So you can imagine that a lot of the non-Chinese OEMs, they had a lot of growth. They sold a lot of cars in the China market. But now there is and they had also at least in numbers of years back, they had a technology competitive advantage versus the Chinese domestic OEMs. Now that has changed. So the Chinese OEMs are now very competitive, in particular also in the area of electrified vehicles and automated and connected vehicles. And also, not to forget, China has built many cities, smart cities. They have new infrastructure, road infrastructure. A lot of the cities are brand new. So that has all certain advantages from a technology perspective. Now, at the same time, China wants to play a role in the standardization, and they are trying to support their own industry to in the export of the technology. So we all know that there is a lot of animosity, unfortunately, between the U.S. and China. But there's a lot at the moment market development from China towards Europe. So bringing new Chinese cars to the European market. And of course, the Chinese need to learn what are the regulations that they have to comply to when it comes to exporting the vehicles and getting through the homologation type approval process, and vice versa. The non-Chinese companies that are going into the China market, in order to be competitive, they need to compete on the highly automated and connected and electrified vehicle technology, and that means they also need to learn more about the Chinese regulations. So there's a give and take, so to speak, and we are quite happy that we are in our organization have a global representation, and the experts are exchanging knowledge on a global base, and also share this knowledge to um, develop standards. And a big part of the mission of IMTS is obviously to accelerate the development of standards and bring our expertise from our expert base into the standards development organizations. And that's why we have SAE, we have IEEE and DEAN, for example. These are all standards development organizations, and so the interface is there, and we can transfer knowledge quicker.
Okay, let's go back to IAMTS.
Mm-hmm.
The year 2022 is a very significant year
Mm-hmm.
because IAMTS separated from SAITC. It became an independent company, and
Mm-hmm.
it is located in Vienna.
Yes.
Uh, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So
About
the
location, Vienna, why Vienna, and
yeah, yeah.
more about the modus operandi of IMTS. I believe it is called
Uh,
IMTS EV or something.
yeah. So one of the trigger points to discuss becoming an independent association was actually this issue that we had from members, the clear feedback, in particular also from Asia and China, that they prefer a neutral organization, a neutral platform, completely neutral, even in the terms of the location. So SAE International and SEITC are, at least the headquarters are in the US. So they wanted to see the members basically had the idea we need a neutral location, and we had three options that were in discussions originally. It was Switzerland, it was Austria, and it was the Netherlands. And then so Austria was finally decided for multiple reasons. I think the strongest was it is a neutral country, but at the same time, it has very known organizations like UNO is represented in Vienna. So everybody felt comfortable that Vienna is a neutral location. And at the same time, from creating an association, Austria has a long tradition to support nonprofits and so we were able to use a legal model that made this transition from SAE-ITC to a neutral association possible.
But its office is in IEEE building.
Yeah, so the office is it's not in the IEEE building. So just to be clear, so it's the building is called Austrian Standards, and Austrian Standards is the owner of the building, and there are different renters in it, and so IEEE is one of them.
Oh,
But we
great.
also got our an office now from IMTS has their office there right next to the IEEE office. So it's co-located, but it's not sub-rented. So we have independent contracts, but yeah, we are in the same building. That's true.
Well, at least you are very close to other
Yeah.
standardization organization,
Yeah.
and this is
Yes.
good for
Yeah.
network.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
So, how do you see development in next couple of years? What will be the focus points in next couple of years of
Mhm.
IMTS?
So what we are trying to do is first that we have about now 40, a little bit more 40 members. So we want to still grow. So we hope that we over the next couple of years we can grow the membership base. We also want to grow our funding in order to implement more projects. And we want to enable interaction between members. And in order to do that, we organize events where the members can meet. By the way, there's an upcoming grand opening event in October 24, 25. Which I hope a lot of both members but also interested parties can attend. So we want to grow, and we also want to get a better regional balance. So we have, of course, we have members from North America, from Europe, and from Asia. Right now, the largest group is Europe, but we want to really get an equal balance between the different key markets of the of IMTS. And so that's very important for us, and we hope that over the next 3 years we can improve that.
Okay, and what is the short term? Let's talk about 2023. Is there
Hmm.
any are there any events in the planning, or
Yeah,
are you
yeah.
planning to go
So
to different
yeah,
event of others to speak at those
yeah.
conferences or
Yeah,
something?
so where I think the important will be, we are very encouraged now by our Zalazon event from this year that to continue the IMTS symposium model. So there will be, we are looking right now or discussing where we go next. So the IMTS symposium will be very important for us next year, hopefully in spring. We are also planning to engage in the IAA Mobility, which is in September. We are IMTS will be a technical sponsor of a new IEEE conference, which is called International Automated International Autonomous. No, so I have to think about it. International Vehicle and Validation Conference. I need to look it up, but there is a new IEEE conference where we will be involved. And I also think we should be present at the SAE World Congress next year, and then co-locate with more conferences. And we will listen to our members, which conferences and events they recommend to us to be present. We don't want to do too much, but we want to do the right things, so the right events.
Nice, nice.
Mhm.
Okay, let's make it interesting for our next podcast. Uh, I don't know. I've not invited yet anybody, but I was thinking about to invite Georg List for our next guest in the podcast, and
Mhm.
to connect podcasts a little bit. That my idea was to ask person in a podcast to formulate a question for a next person who will be invited in a podcast. So,
Mhm.
is there any intriguing question that you would like to ask Georg List for a podcast that I can ask him in the podcast?
Yes. Well, a question that you may be able to ask him is mm, what his most important goal is as a technical. He's the chair of the technical leadership committee,
Yeah.
and it's a very important role because he's basically guiding the work groups and the study groups. And I mean, it would be interesting to ask him, um, what is his strategy? What are the big goals for him as a TLC chair to move IMTS forward? So I think you can ask him this question.
Okay.
Yes.
For sure, I will ask that.
Yeah.
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 Very interesting discussion, very interesting
Mhm.
conversation, and I
Mhm.
really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
There is something what surprised me because I'm quite involved in IMTS activities.
Mhm.
It looks that there is a lot of activity on different areas. People are
Mhm.
communicating within certain groups,
Mhm.
But you're keeping a track on everything. How do you do that? You have
Well,
dedicated
I
meetings
think
to
it's training. It's training. So I would and I have to get back to my BMW time. I was thrown in very complicated projects at BMW at a young age, and typically it was always bringing a large group of different players together and keep them together towards a common goal. I was involved in these vehicle projects and then sometimes very large IT programs. And so I think I over the years I developed a skill set to kind of manage this, and I enjoy it. I do it. I like to do this, and I think the key is that you must have a clear strategy. You must have a lot of discipline. This is another thing, and you need to have an interaction with the key people, and always have an ear for people that tell you, I think there needs to be something done, or here's somebody not happy, or we need to move here, and then to basically prioritize and decide what to do next, right? So it's a and I'm happy to give my experience further to younger people, but I think it's training and experience in projects.
yeah. And you are also very patient with everybody. You
Yeah.
take
Not
time.
always,
That's
but I have a certain degree of patience. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Joachim, thank you very much. It was very
Okay.
pleasant discussion, and
Yeah.
most of talking is done by you, but it was very enjoyable. Thank you very much, and
Okay.
we will keep in touch.
Thank you.